I'm David from Bokeh Photography, and today we're checking out the Sony 50mm f1.8 FE E-mount lens for full frame. And I'm testing this today on the A7R and the a6300, and then we'll do a quick test on the a6000 and see how this goes. 6 elements in 5 groups. It's double Gauss design, which is the traditional 50mm design that everybody used back from the 60s all the way through the, well, all the way up till now, because here's another one. One thing you have to know is this lens, I think, was just tweaked and designed glass-wise just really, really well. Just good engineering on the glass itself, because there's no extra low dispersion elements in it, there's no crystal elements in it, there's no fluoride elements in it, nothing good, you know, it's just glass. No nano coatings, none of that. It's got coatings on it, the standard coatings that you see on most lenses, but very minimal. And again, it's a fly-by-wire, there's no f-stop, no aperture ring, no manual focus bump stop or anything like that. It does come with a lens hood, and it's very small. It's about the same size as the 28mm f2. It's very light. The autofocus is painfully slow on certain cameras. The A7R has a hard time with autofocus on this thing, and I imagine the A7 will as well. It's a DC motor. Now, the DC motors are the motors from like 10 years ago. So it's not a stepping motor. It makes noise, let's face it, and it's slow to autofocus. On this, there's a lot of times where I had to just put it in manual focus because it couldn't find focus. On the a6300 and the a6000, it did a lot better because it was able to use phase detection. This camera does not utilize phase detection, so there is an issue with that. But how does this compare to my favorite lens, the Sigma 60mm f2.8 on the a6300? And I know you guys want me to compare this against a Zeiss. Now, I don't have the Zeiss that you want, but I do have a Zeiss lens. So I've got the, and I've had this for a while, the Carl Zeiss 50mm f1.4 planar T, and we'll run it up against this one because this is actually a very solid design, and we'll see how well it does compared to this. So let's just dive into this, shall we? Okay, so let's test out some lens flare really quick. Now, this is CFL, and you know, it's basically doing what I expect it to do. You know, this lens has very minimal coatings, so right now we're at f4, and this looks pretty good. Now let me just crank this all the way down to f1.8. You can see it more, kind of a halo effect. It's not too bad. Now let's look at LED lights. And all right, here we go. Let me focus in on there. Now that is a little overwhelming. So let me stop this down here. Back to f4. And still, you know, it's decent. It's not great. All right, so on the A7 and A7R, this thing is really lackluster for focus. Now in movie mode, I want you to just listen to the autofocus. Now this is on continuous focus with center turned on, and this is with me half pressing the button. Now on the A7R, it's extremely slow to focus. This is it focusing on auto. It's quiet, but slow. But this is how they overcome the noise issue. Now if I go back to hitting the button, yeah, noisy. Hello, Clarice. Anyway, let's dive in this here, and let me show you the issue on the A7R with the autofocus. And you can see it's locking, but it's bouncing really bad. And on here, it does much better in AFS mode, and then it seems to lock on pretty well. For some reason, AFC mode on the A7R, it just can't do it. Okay, now this is autofocus mode on the a6300, and let's see how well this does. Now you'll notice it's a lot faster and very quiet when left to its own autofocusing, but the second, again, that you get impatient with it, start to hear it again. But if you let it just autofocus on AFC, and I've got tracking set to fast, it does okay. Alright, so let's take a look at some images really quick. And I love to shoot foliage because foliage shows you chromatic aberrations. And I turned off all of the lens correction settings in the A7R so we can see what this actually looked like. Now, you can see there's a few chromatic aberrations in here, but very, very minor. I mean, this lens is doing a hell of a good job. Again, everything is shut off. And you can see there's some minor chromatic aberrations in the highlight areas. But really, that's it. Okay, same with this one here. You see very minor amounts. Overall, very clean, very sharp. Optically, this lens is very impressive for as simple as it is, but realistically, there are chromatic aberrations, as you can see in the sign here. So you see some minor chromatic aberrations in the door handle, but this is very good, and this is with it turned off. Now, if I turn it on and reshoot this, these would go away completely. I mean, they're just completely unnoticeable. For this, I just wanted to show you guys the quality of bokeh blur in the background. It does a pretty good job. Not quite as good as Zeiss, but not bad. Okay, right here, the bokeh is doing really well. And this is very, very sharp. And this is shot at 2.2. Same with this one here. I was focusing right on the neck to try to just get that in focus and everything else be the bokeh. And yeah, the lens is doing a great job. But for these, I manual focus the lens. Okay, on this one, I do believe I did autofocus on it. And again, just a very clean image, very good color, good contrast. Now right here, I wanted to show you guys this. This lens has no barrel distortion whatsoever. I mean, it does an excellent job. This is uncorrected, so you know, you can see how straight this line is. You can see how straight this roof line is. Okay, sharpness wise, this is at f2.8, and this is where the sharpness really starts to set in and actually looks really good. This one was at f11, I believe, yes. And let me go into actual size here. So landscape photography wise, this does, again, an excellent job. No chromatic aberrations, corner to corner. This thing is extremely sharp. Again, just shooting some more macro, and this was at f10, and really doing just an excellent job. Okay, this was kind of funny. So I'm moving backwards through this, and you'll see the problems that I'm having. Now, this shot was a good shot, but I manually focused this shot. And again, this is shot with the A7R, and let's really magnify this so we can look at it. You can see the chromatic aberrations in the water droplets, but I really like this image overall, especially the splash points. I think that those just look really cool. And, you know, overall, this was very easy to manual focus, but it could not autofocus this at all. And this is what I'm talking about. But this is what I kept getting. And oh man, was it annoying. So yeah, that was miserable. Back to flowers here, still very clean. And just to show you the quality of bokeh in the depth of field, this does a great job. I mean, I really like this out here. This looks great. The out of focus areas are just really good, and the areas that are supposed to be in focus are really sharp. And the lack of chromatic aberrations is what's really nice. Same with this shot and this one. Here was as close as I could possibly focus. And we have some ghosting going on because this was probably at f1.8. Yes, it was. Okay, now this was also wide open, and I just wanted to show you guys what the corners look like wide open. Still very good. Yeah, you can't complain about this. As a matter of fact, I'll go to this corner down here at the bottom, and I'll really take a look at it just so you guys can see. And this is at f1.8, pretty much equal distance away, and it's ghosting, but God, this is really good for f1.8. This is what the vignetting looks like. This is at f1.8, this is at f2.8, and this is at f4. I mean, you can tell the difference between the first one, but that's about it. I mean, it's pretty much non-existent. And this is at full frame, not APS-C size. Okay, now I just wanted to show you guys this really quick. I thought you might find this interesting. Okay, let's compare these. Now, the lens over here is the Sony that we're reviewing. The lens over here is the Zeiss 50mm planar T. And quality-wise, they're about the same in the center. You notice that the Zeiss is slightly warmer and has a little bit more contrast, but that's about it. But the thing that's really crazy are the corners. Now, the Zeiss planar T is still an $800 lens, and the corners are definitely way more out of focus. But the thing that's really crazy is the barrel distortion. You can see how the top of my artwork here is perfectly straight, but here on the Zeiss it's slightly bowed. The Zeiss does suffer from barrel distortion, which is really kind of a bummer. Okay, so that was at 1.8. We'll just jump ahead here to f5.6. Well, no, we'll go to f2.8 first, and we'll compare those. Okay, at f2.8, this both lenses really come alive. I mean, they are like super sharp, but on the sides, you can definitely see a difference here. The Sony is holding up way better than the Zeiss glass, which I thought was very interesting. All right, now let's pop ahead to 5.6. Now, 5.6 on both lenses is that is the sweet spot of the center. And these were shot on the A7R. So, as you can see here, very sharp. Again, the Zeiss glass is just slightly warmer. But as we move to the outside edges, if you just follow this piece right here, this is still fairly sharp right here, and right here it's soft. And it's because of the barrel distortion on the Zeiss, which is really kind of a bummer. Okay, let's see how this lens compares to the Sigma f2.8 on APS-C size. Now, just so you guys know, resolution-wise, the Sigma on APS-C size was getting 3,700 lines of resolution, and this is just under that at 3,600. Now, the corners in the sweet spot at f5.6 are getting, I think, somewhere around 3,100 or 3,200 lines of resolution, and it's really good. Extremely good for this camera. But anyway, this is at f2.8. Now the center is sharper on the Sigma, but if we go out to this side, yeah, it's still sharper on the Sigma. And just by looking at this little spot right here, you can obviously tell. So at f2.8, the Sigma is definitely still the sharper option. Now, let me get out of here, and let's go to f5.6, because this is the sweet spot of this lens. And again, we see pretty much the same thing. The Sigma's just slightly sharper. I mean, they both look great. Color and contrast-wise are about identical. But the Sigma is just a tad sharper. But again, this is not like a big deal. You know, you're not going to be able to tell in your final output if you just sharpen the Sony just a tad. And you can pretty much fool anybody. This upper corner actually looks better on the Sony than it did on the Sigma. Not sure why. Okay, I just wanted to show you guys a few low light images off of the Sony a6300. And, you know, this lens just does really well. I mean, the Bokeh, now this has JPEG compression on it, and this was shot at ISO 800, so there's a little bit of, noise that it has to deal with coming on. But I really like the bokeh in the background, even though this seems a little harsher than it should be. But that again is because of the ISO. And let's see here. Right here's a good example. This is still at 800 and very smooth. And this is Bob, one of my artists, by the way. So what do I think of this lens? Overall, optically, it's really, really good. It's a very simple design, 6 elements in 5 groups, double Gauss design. This design has been around for 40 years. And Sony just went in and corrected all the issues with it and turned out a great lens. I mean, it's just good design. The only problem is they threw this shitty-ass autofocus motor on it. So on the A7R, autofocusing with this lens is terrible, terrible. And continuous focus movie mode is even slower. Now on the A7 II, the A7R II, and the A7S II, you don't have that issue. But on the earlier ones, I imagine you're gonna. So, it's problematic. But on the A6000, A6300, the autofocus was actually very good, just noisy. So it just depends on what you want to do with it. It's not weatherproof. There's, no special things about it. The only thing that you get that's really fancy is this nice hood. It's like, ooh. How does it compare to a real Carl Zeiss? I mean, the Sonar Planar T ZF. This thing is sharper, straight through. It has better corners and no barrel distortion, but this has slightly higher contrast, slightly warmer color, lower chromatic aberrations, and better bokeh. But it's all negligible. I mean, so minuscule that this is still a much better option. So, realistically on the A7R, I have to manual focus this lens. There's just no getting around it. But that's okay, because that's pretty much what I do with the A7R anyway. So I am perfectly happy with this as an option for this. Now for the A6000, A6300, that's slightly different. How does this compare to the 50mm OSS 1.8? Well, realistically, this is slightly sharper, definitely sharper at f1.8, has better corners, less vignetting, and no barrel distortion. So it's going to be better, but the autofocus is noisier. It doesn't really hunt that much. It seems to be okay. The OSS 50mm 1.8 is probably a hair faster, really not sure. But anyway, this does do a good job. The only problem is it's still not as good as the Sigma 60mm f2.8. This lens still rings king on the A6000, A6300. There's just nothing sharper than this. So realistically, you can do it, but I just think that this is just a slightly better option. But if you're going back and forth between APS-C size and full frame, then definitely get this one. I mean, for $249, it is really excellent image quality. The only problem is on the A7R, it's a slug. So anyway, I hope you guys like this review. Give me a thumbs up. Otherwise, we'll talk to you guys next time. See ya.